when you're marketers marketing the marketers. It's a really fun and interesting and different place to be. You're marketing to yourself.
We know that our audience will give us that positive credit for it. Being creative, being clever, being witty, a little bit unexpected, quirky. There's all these different kind of elements we can play with that marketers say, what, MailChimp, bravo, you're not just shoving a very rational message down my throat.
And when you are, you're kind of aware of it.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Funnel Vision, where we're speaking with leaders in digital marketing who are thinking big and leaving their mark on their industry. Consider this an opportunity to stop and reflect and learn from some of the industry's best. My name is Paula Mejia.
And I'm Sasha Belenki.
Let's get started.
So today on the show, we're joined by two marketing leaders from none other than Mailchimp, a company that has evolved from a simple email marketing tool to a full-fledged, all-inclusive marketing platform. We're joined by Mark Lodwick, Senior Director of Integrated Marketing and Advertising, and Jeremy Jones, Global Group Creative Director. Jeremy and Mark, welcome to Funnel Vision.
Thanks for having us.
So it's a pleasure to have you both here today. Intuit Mailchimp is one of the most recognizable companies, I would say, maybe in the last 30 years or more, and there are 1,000 reasons for that. You have super strong brand personality, very memorable creative, probably the most memorable podcast ad I've ever heard in my life. I think you kind of invented podcast advertising in a way because of that ad. So we wanted to take an opportunity to learn from your experience, how you made all this work. But before we jump into the meat, it would be great if you guys could tell us about how you landed here. What was your journey? Mark, do you want to start?
Sure, no problem. Mark Lodwick, and I'm a classically trained marketer, if you will. A lot of my background is in the CPG space in brand management, brand marketing. And about 3 years ago, decided to make the move into tech. And I've always been interested in tech solutions. And clearly, marketing is heading in a direction of personalization and first-party data. And I wanted to see how a different business model operated. And it's been a really cool journey. We'll get more into it, but one of the things that I was really drawn to joining Intuit Mailchimp was that the brand Mailchimp in a B2B space really didn't behave like a typical B2B brand. And that spoke to me. I think at the end of the day, we're talking to consumers, we're talking to people, and emotion and brand leading the way is never a bad thing. A very cool brand that I aspired to join. And since coming here, I've only seen that it's been a fantastic ride.
And what about you, Jeremy?
Yeah, I went to school, untraditional for a creative. I went to school for marketing and business and thought I was going to work. Yeah, thought I was going to work in the music industry. I was touring and playing in rock bands, which then somehow all famous advertising folks, you just ended up landing in the advertising agency world. And so that's where I got my start on the account side before transitioning to the creative side and becoming a copywriter, and then cut my teeth at kind of small local shops before joining J. Walter Thompson and having global roles within WPP, big network advertising. And I worked my way through the ranks and got to the point to where I was just exhausted. Tons of traveling, managing lots of teams all over the world, and was looking for what my next step would be. And this Mailchimp opportunity came about where they were looking for somebody to help start their in-house creative team and really help scale it. So I took the leap of faith. Like Mark, I was so curious about the brand and who the people were that were bringing it to these new, unexpected places, and just really excited to have the opportunity to be a part of that team to push forward, especially now as Mailchimp's gone from startup to grown up a little bit more. And with the acquisition of Intuit, of just how fast we're accelerating and moving up market. Yeah, it's really exciting base to be in right now. And we're in the next chapter of the brand's history.
Wow. So there are so many things you guys touched upon that I just want to think, like, not sure which one to tackle first. I hope our audience feels the same. So I think something that really resonates and has come across in a few of the interviews we've done is how important that human to human connection is, whether you're doing B2B, B2C. And I think MailChimp, like you said, Mark, is so good at it. And that partly has to do, I think, a lot to the creative approach that you take. How do you think about it? Like, how do you create that? How do you make that the standard and make sure that all of those interactions with your brand feel so genuine and human, as opposed to, I don't know, I think of, not to call them out in a negative way, but I'm thinking like a SAP, very different vibe than MailChimp. So what is your playbook?
Yeah. This could take on the entirety of the rest of the podcast, right? This one topic, because it is so core to what we do and so important. First off, I lead the brand experience team. Part of that team is our agency partner, our family member, if you will, in Wink, which Jeremy leads. And what I'm trying to do and what the team is trying to do is to make sure that the brand is always coming across as creative, compelling, and that it's consistent. So those are the kind of the three things that I think about all the time. And when I got here, there was a commitment to certainly creative, like above all else. It was like, if we do nothing else, we want to make sure that we break through and we're interesting. And we have a personality. It's a strong personality brand. Some people are not cut out to work. That feels uncomfortable. But we think that it starts with building that emotional connection with the brand over and over again consistently. And if you think about the space that B2B can be, it can be highly transactional. Hey, we've got a product, we've got a solution, buy here. We can do that, but we can do it in a really interesting wrapper, in a way that makes you want to be drawn, in a way that makes you want to connect with the brand. So a lot of times our briefs will start with the human insight. That's where everything is centered. And then we figure out, all right, what are the intersection points where the product, the feature, the benefits are going to come in, that ultimately that kind of human layer of that is backed by an insight that then MailChimp is going to bring its personality in and establish and bring all the way through. That's at the backbone of how we approach creative and briefs. Jeremy can go into the process even more.
Yeah, I mean, I think, especially in our category, when you're marketers marketing the marketers, it's a really fun and interesting and different place to be. You're marketing to yourself. And so just understanding that, like that's a hat that you wear, but throughout the day, you're wearing all kinds of other hats as a person, as a mom or a dad, or just living your life. First, we understand and we always talk about just how core it is when we're thinking of our audience to make sure that they feel understood. We always say internally, like, we get you, we got you. And that's the we get you part first. So that's acknowledged. That comes across in our work with the little wink that comes from Freddie, which is why we named ourselves Wink, to honor that connection that we have with our customers. I think also it's really quick when you're coming up with work or thinking of a brief to be very rational first. I think we as humans, when we make decisions, we don't make them rationally, like we make them emotionally first, right? Like you've probably heard of the saying, think, feel, do, but it's really, the order's different, right? The order is really feel, think, do. And so I think when you unpack that and that kind of comes across to us in our briefs, as Mark mentioned, we really try to get at that human insight to where we can make those human connections first and then acknowledge folks as a marketer and the problems that they're trying to solve.
There's something that you said that's really interesting, because often when I think about maybe a more traditional performance marketing brief or something that's more, like you said, transactional, the first insight that you look at is what's the pain point of your audience. And you didn't use the word pain point, right? And obviously there is a pain point you're trying to solve for, but you went a couple layers back around what is important to this person, what's in it for them beyond, I have this problem, how much money can I pay you to solve it for me? Can you give us an example of a creative that you had that you're really proud of in terms of that insight and how it set you on the right path to connecting with your customer?
Yeah, I think one, and this was like the first where we really brought to life this feeling that customers had, and we brought it to life visually. And it was a campaign that we called The Clustomer. And so in our world, marketers are really trying to personalize all of their marketing as best they can, but without really segmenting and using certain tools, they didn't realize, or they get to a point where they're stuck, where they're just sending the same message to everyone at the same time. And so in research, we picked up on this insight where, they got to this point and they weren't sure really what to do. And so bringing to life that problem in a fun way, right? It was just, you don't realize it, but you're creating this cluster, this amalgamation group of people trying to send one marketing message to many, and it's not really working. And so we unpack that, showing how with Mailchimp, you can dissect those different groups of people and personalize your marketing and kind of save them from the customer. And it was something the team really ran with early on. It was just a word on a piece of paper before we had the idea of customer. And we were like, what is customer?
What can we do with that word?
Yeah, what can we do with that? And we used AI actually to visualize it quickly to see what a customer could be or look like. And when we just had this different ball of people that was moving around and working in concert, talking directly to marketers, like, you're creating us. It's not very fun to do this. Why don't you try another way? It was just light bulb moment for us. And when people saw it in testing too, they just lit up on it and said, yes, that's right. Customer, I have that problem. I get it. Thank you, Mailchimp. This is what I've been trying to say. That would probably be the first big one for us, where it was the big unlock.
And we also have two kind of, simple tests that we throw out there just culturally as a group. One is, am I excited to show this work to my family? Do I want to show this to my friends? Am I proud of this? That's a really good litmus test that we're always, would I be interested in it? Let alone, do I want to show people that are removed from it? And I think it's just important that we also acknowledge we don't like to half-ass things. So if it's half-baked, it's probably not baked. And so those are just a couple of overarching quick tests that we all have in our guts that we all buy into on the team.
Yeah, and you have that in your gut, right? Because like you said, you're marketers marketing to marketers. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
It's kind of meta, but it's tough.
That's awesome, I mean, so many B2B marketers, they start out with, I will never be the expert. I will never know as much as my customer. And you guys are not in that position. You start out at a baseline of really understanding your audience on a deeper level.
We're in a similar boat because we also market to marketers. So the online presence, and we're moving very hard into the creation of digital assets. So definitely marketing to marketers. And I always think, does that make our job harder or easier? Of course, being the ICP, there's a huge advantage there. But marketers are, we're exposed to marketing content as a consumer, but we also are always consuming it, like you said, in a meta level. And I feel like whenever I get targeted in anything, whether it's a cold pitch or an ad, I'm always like, really, was that the right copy?
Right.
It makes you judgier.
Yeah, a little judgier. But I think what's fun about interacting as a consumer with a brand that it connects with you emotionally is you're able to remove that judgy layer because you connected it, like you said, emotionally first, as a human first. And then whether it's the right solution for you, you can evaluate that later with the thinking part of that process. But I think it gives you an in that some of the more 3,000 word white papers that are gated, I have a harder time connecting those. But I was curious if you felt, because you've also gone mid-market, and that's also our play, if the legacy of Mailchimp's brand, which is very strong, but maybe more dominant in a different area of the business, do you see it as an advantage, or do you sometimes feel like it holds you back a little bit because it's harder for some consumers, even if they're marketers, to see you in a different light?
I'll start and Jeremy jump in. So this is more, in my opinion, being right for the time. So that's at the heart of the story. Back when Mailchimp started, the competitive context was nowhere near where it is today. And so providing what was email marketing and what the definition of marketing automations has just gone up over time. And when you start out and you become the main player in the category, you then have to evolve as fast or faster than the category does. And AI, for example, computing power in general, the things that you can do, that has gone through the roof over the past couple of years and is accelerating faster and faster. So we have a job to do to meet our customers' expectations, but also their customers, or C2s, if you will, the consumers on the other end, they have expectations on how they're going to be marketed to. Personalization, the expectations for, I'm going to get a message that's right for me at the time that's right for me in the way that's right for me. Like that in a nutshell is what we're trying to do, but at scale, that's really complicated. And so we have a job to do as Mailchimp to drive out ahead of the competition and continue to provide product, solution, experience that is very powerful, but at the same time, accessible, intuitive. Our brand definitely allows for that. And then we have to pay off that promise over and over again with our customers. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge all of us are dealing with in this space. I think Wix no different in that pursuit.
Yeah, I think the complexity has just gotten at such a monumental level in just terms of consumers and how they're just the attention economy, right? There's so many different channels that you need to show up in, and Mailchimp started with kind of the one and the core and the base, but like Mark was saying, we've had to evolve rapidly and quickly, bringing on SMS, taking on and getting into more ways that you can automate your marketing across the journey, and just growing with your customers, I think is our brand has opened up doors where people acknowledge. And now it's just showing that we have all these other tools. And it's hard when your name's Mailchimp, right? Of showing that you're more than just email. You're more than just these email marketing tools, that you are a marketing platform. And so that's part of our challenge, is getting folks to understand just maybe the things they don't see in app or what they're not using that's there. And so it's an interesting challenge. And I think you picked up on it because Mailchimp in the past was historically the brand you start with. And now we're trying to get people to understand that it's also now the brand you can grow with.
We were actually curious about how you've tackled that evolution and what specifically you're doing to create those signals across a very wide audience that there is this change happening without compromising on like the core essence of Mailchimp is this fun and really with a wink thing. So how across so many touch points are you able to move everyone up or segment according to who you're talking to?
Yeah, it's really become functional, right? Like before, maybe a few years ago, we didn't have a really big life cycle marketing initiative. We do now. We didn't really play in the space of thought leadership as much. And so it's just having those intentions and really leaning in, but doing it in a Mailchimp-y way. And because that's what people expect from us when we show up. And again, just making sure folks understand we get them and we got them, not just with the tools, but now with the insights and information and relationships that we're able to bring in, because we're still democratizing marketing in a way outside of just the software by bringing in these, we're working with Les Binet, one of the kind of the godfathers of the long and the short of it, like balancing performance and brand marketing. And we're offering folks and thought leaders like that up to our customers. And so they can be better at their jobs, become better marketers. And it's just signaling and really leaning into those things now and making sure we have them stood up and have operationalized them as part of our marketing mix, so to speak.
I think we embrace the funnel too, Jeremy, to help us do this. At the top, you're going to have a broader base message, and then we really start to drill down into features and functionality and and customer stories. A customer like you that succeeded with Mailchimp, check us out. And so as you get through the funnel and you've got a more qualified audience that's really considering, you want to show even harder proof points. And we work really hard at our claims and making sure that we're always trying to up our game as our product continues to develop. We have less of a job to do to establish Mailchimp, in terms of its awareness, we have more of an opportunity to show what's underneath the hood. But to your point, Paula, we can't lose the brand in that. We can't get just too overly functional. So it's constant balance and something that we incorporate in all our briefs. And we really utilize the funnel. I think we've done that successfully in order to drive consideration.
It sounds like now you guys really understand what that balance is, but was there ever a point where there was internal debate? Should Freddie be a little more serious? Should he be like Frederick up market? Do we need to like massage this thing a little bit? Or is it we know who we are MailChimp, and regardless of where in the market we sit and who that audience is, we're MailChimp?
We do talk about MailChimp shows up like anybody. If I show up, I can show up black tie or I can be in sweats, and I'm still Mark, and I still who I am, but how I present myself might be different for different occasions. We do talk about that.
And Freddie's full name, for those wondering, is Freddie von Chippenheimer IV. So if we really wanted to get serious, we could really lean into that.
His mom calls him Frederick, though.
Yeah.
You know that happens.
That's not even in the name.
But I still think back to making sure the wink is in the work, whether the tonality changes because we're in more of a serious conversation or we're more kind of a brand level, we still make sure that little is in there, regardless of where we're at in the funnel and where we're speaking to, because that's the part that people remember and take away from the brand. Just like, that thoughtfulness, that little extra bit.
We're going back to the marketers and who we serve. They give, is it a double-edged sword? Is it actually they're more critical because they know that you're marketing to them? But on the other side, on the flip side, you get credit when you're clever and when you do good marketing. So we really try to make sure that we pay that off because we know that our audience will give us that positive credit for it. So being creative, being clever, being witty, a little bit unexpected, quirky, there's all these different kind of elements we can play with that marketers say, what, MailChimp, bravo, you're not just shoving a very rational message down my throat.
And when you are, you're kind of aware of it. There's some of that
that's true.
Deprecation part. Because look, when you are marketing a software as a marketer, if your advertising for that isn't good, they're going to have start to have questions about your products. And so we understand that balance. And so we're very thoughtful when we do go to market in every single part of the channel of just making sure the craft is really there and that we're not taking anything for granted.
I want to ask you guys about the performance marketing versus brand marketing. And I think there's this constant struggle that a lot of companies face to keep performance marketing from crowding out brand building activities. Now, you guys have a very strong brand. I think it's almost impossible to crowd out the MailChimp brand, but is that something that you're seeing? How do you guys think about that internally? What does that balance look like for you?
That, first of all, that is the challenge of every marketer that's listening to this podcast. It's long-term versus short-term. And I'll tell you, I don't know any business that is like pounding the table going, I need more long-term results. I think of it a little bit like you have no choice but to have short-term. You've got to have results now, otherwise we're going to be out of jobs, right? We're here to sell a product. We're here to drive a business. So it's like you want dessert, you got to eat your vegetables. But I really want dessert. It takes leaders to have it as a non-negotiable that we will not sacrifice long-term for short-term. I think, you're going to get a crunch where you've got to hit short-term in a short sprint. That's fine. But then you got to find ways to experiment, and you got to find ways behind. Jeremy does an awesome thing with his team. He gets them together, whether anybody likes it or not, and they ideate on crazy, fun, wacky, interesting things that they're passionate about. They then package that up. We have a sit down, and this happens once every month or 2 months. And it's, hey, we've got a really great brand idea. We want to talk about it. What do you think? And it forces all of us to go, oh man, this is why we got into marketing in the first place. This is exciting. I'm excited. Jeremy's excited to bring it to our boss. And that kind of exercise also helps ritualize we've got to continue to drive brand here, and we all love it. And so why wouldn't we spend a little bit of time just thinking about that and throwing it out there?
Do you think, given the size and recognition of their brand, that any interaction could be separate from the brands? At Wix, we talk a lot about brand performance because even our performance marketing at this point is pushing a view of our brand and experience of the brand every time. And sometimes you have, a whole Super Bowl ad to do it. And sometimes you have a couple seconds in a static post that's interrupting someone's day. And the accumulation of all of those interactions is eventually what's driving both.
Sure.
So obviously there are some assets that you put out there in the world for a very specific goal. But I feel like we're in Wix is in a luxurious position where we want growth and we also want it short and long term, but it's less like urgent to drive that incremental growth than maybe a smaller business who needs to make X target, or that Series C is just not going to happen.
And where the performance and brand efforts might be competing for resources also.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Always. That is a constant challenge. We do one thing that comes to mind is we do tabletop reviews, which is like old school. You just lay out everything you got around the conference table, if you will. And we take a look at it. We take a zoom back. And to your point, Paula, whether it's a long format video experience or just this quick hitter static banner, the sum of all those parts and each of them individually has to be paying off on our brand assets, what we represent as a brand, our personality, our tone, copy, even the fonts that we use. This all establishes that long-term equity. And that's something that we also do just to get a sense check, zoom in, zoom out.
That establishes the long-term equity. And then also in the other direction, brand has the power to lift every other metric, right? And you need that recognition at a leadership level, I think, to really value the interplay between both.
Yeah. Brand is like the 401k of marketing, right? It's going to pay off over the long term, but you're not going to check in on your 401k every day.
So that's just refreshing, right?
Yeah. As long as you can get folks in leadership to understand that, then they can picture like, yeah, that's going to grow and compound over time. But that the performance aspect, because you've invested, like you were saying, Sasha, is going to increase too. There's like a benefit, like the two of them together become a superpower. When you focus just in one or the other, it's not having the same impact. I think the more that you can create that multiplier effect to where they're each benefiting from each other and you're putting signals of each, like we spend a lot of time on CTAs. It may sound ridiculous, but we're like crafting, there's 3 words in a CTA, but we're making sure that combination of words is doing the best that it can. And then we've created on our team within Wink, working with kind of our integrated marketing friends, a sandbox where we're just constantly testing ads and ideas, like just random ideas, and putting them in the mix to understand how they're performing, just to give ourselves that gut check that we talked about. Like maybe this brand thing in the bottom of the funnel works better than this really performance marketing focused thing, and vice versa. So I think it's being able to stay curious, but understanding that you have to have that balance.
What are those metrics that are most important to you?
So depending on where we're at in the funnel, it's getting people just to lean in that one next step. And whether it's they're in market, we talk about in market and out of market a lot, right? 95% of your audience is usually out of market. And so that's why brand is so important. So we're top of mind when people do get to that trigger to where now they become in market and they've heard of MailChimp before and we have that familiarity. And then when we're hitting folks in market, maybe with a claim or that kind of harder hitting message, we want them to take that next action, whether that's visiting our website and getting to that pricing page and talking to a sales rep on the other side, just getting them to raise their hand now in a way that they've been primed and they're ready and we've gotten them over that hump.
Do you guys work with your sales team, like from a creative perspective? Because I'm curious, you have such a unique experience, at least until the pricing page, and then a human takes over. How do you make it one cohesive funnel?
Yeah, so I think that's the beauty of having an in-house creative team within Mailchimp, especially, is our team fits across the entire end-to-end experience. And so we have a whole team focused on sales enablement, working directly with our sales team, hearing what they're talking about each and every day with our customers, where potential hurdles are, things that people are loving. And so we're developing different creative stimulus for them, videos. When we hear of a really amazing kind of success story, we're quickly trying to get in there and bring that story to life, whether it be through a quote that ends up in an ad or a banner, or something that we're then able to create kind of a video from and use that as marketing or in our newsletter. It's a constant communication back and forth.
And we're designing the materials that they're using such that the prospects on the other end are having, again, a consistent brand experience, even if it's a takeaway, a one-pager. And Jeremy's right, like that connection where our marketing team, but also our creative agency is at the same dinner table with the sales team. It's unique and not something that I've experienced before. It's a competitive advantage, I think, especially for the brand experience, the longer term elements that we're able to provide.
It sounds like you have a really strong balance also between the strategic and the creative. It seems like there's still a lot of space to just see what comes out and get together and brainstorm.
There's a respect, I think, unique and special respect for both sides of that same coin.
Yeah.
And the sides, if you will, have earned the respect of the other side. It hasn't been just dictated. It's, hey, we're really good at what we do. Let me show you. And over again, paying off on that. It's, okay, I can trust here. And it's Jeremy and my job to ensure that both sides of strategic and creative or performance and long-term, these push-pulls are being brought into balance. And we really have an open kind of got your back, optimistic culture that we've cultivated. And we encourage curiosity and a flat organization, if you will. It doesn't matter what your tenure or your title. You've got an idea, you've got a curiosity, you've got a wonder, bring that forward. And we encourage that behavior. A few little nuggets in there for how we operate.
Yeah, in terms of Wink, it's interesting because you have a world-class advertising agency, design agency, strategist, lifecycle marketing experts, content and editorial folk, original content people. Like, it's such an amazing diversity of thoughts. We call it like a motley crew, or we practice this motley crew mindset of where we're all moving as different parts of the band, but we'll lean into certain kind of instruments or channels at times, which everyone is supporting. And it's this really amazing dance that's just grown over time, specifically within the last 3 to 4 years of just how much we've scaled. And it's because of how much more Mailchimp has grown up too. So how we were talking about before of making sure as we're going more up market, that we had the capabilities. Wink has grown with that to kind of service those kind of new channels or new initiatives, but still bringing that Wink to the work or to everything that we do. Like Mark was saying, we're so embedded in the business and in the same meetings to where it's almost an unfair advantage to have creatives that are understanding the company's different initiatives, what's going on with the products in real time at the same time as everyone else. We're just able to move so much more quickly.
How many people are in your team? Because it sounds, Mailchimp is not small. So how are you everywhere?
Yeah, I don't know. It's
roughly like,
yeah, it's so hard. We have about 40 people in Wink that are full-time folks. And then outside of that, we're constantly expanding and contracting with contractors. Sometimes right now we're in the busy season. It's about 80 folks total working across the entire experience. And that expands and contracts, like I was saying, depending on the season and the time of the year. But yeah, it's a large team and it's big on ops, helping with and orchestrating just that delicate dance across all the different channels.
Yeah. And we're also expanding in a different way geographically. So pushing out internationally more. I mean, that no surprise, that's a multiplier in terms of our creative output, because you have localized opportunities, localized insights. The more sophisticated we get as a global company, the more markets we go into, that puts that much more on the creative output. And it's cool, but it's a constant resourcing prioritization kind of discussion. And that's something that we also lean into big time. The ops group, our producers, they're fantastic. And they really help organize not only the creative agency, but the full marketing operation.
So I think creative output is actually a great transition point for us, because one of the things that we always like to ask on Funnel Vision at the end of the show, to get creative output, you also have to get the right input. And we like to ask marketers, what is inspiring you? Who are you following? What are you reading? And what are you listening to stay inspired, either in the field or outside of it?
Jeremy, you're going to be much more interesting than me. Go ahead.
It's all interesting. It's getting into someone's head, that's always interesting.
Yeah, I think I tend to like to fish in a lot of different people's rivers and spend a lot of time outside of kind of marketing to draw insight from. I like to fly fish, for one. That's like a new hobby, to where I'm just able to disconnect and clear my mind of everything to then have fresh new ideas that come to me. So that's one thing that I do, and I encourage everyone to do, is take time outside of your normal day-to-day, no matter what that is, just to give yourself that time to reflect and focus on something else, because that's when I'm usually hit with a big idea or a thought, when I'm not trying to think about it. One book that
I was wondering if that was a metaphor at first.
It is. It's both.
It's both a metaphor.
It started as a metaphor.
Like to go fly fishing.
It started as a metaphor and then led me to taking up
love
fly
that.
fishing.
That was beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. And now I'm like an etymologist, like studying bugs. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
So from bugs to marketing, I don't know how I got in there, but I can just tell you about the life cycle of different larvae and stuff.
Life cycle marketing.
Yeah, exactly. It all full circle. It all connects. But yeah, and then I'm reading a book right now by Damon Stapleton, a New Zealand-based creative. I followed him for a while. He had a really interesting blog called like Damon's Brain. Just a lot of different insights from a creative standpoint that he's given. His book is Keep Shooting Until You See the Clear Smoke, and it's all about ammunition for creatives. And it's really great. I recommend it to anybody if you're feeling stuck. There's just lots of different ideas in there to help you think differently or to get you out of your rut. What I'm watching, I just finished Penguin, which was not what I thought it was. Really great acting by Colin Farrell. So that's in my free time. I'll dive into whatever's out there in Netflix entertainment.
Cool. What about you, Mark?
Time away from the screen, time away from purposeful thinking, and more the ability to let your mind wander. Things that I hold sacred for me is exercise, cooking, and spending time with my family and my kids. I think focusing on my kids constantly brings up bringing us back to curiosity and questions and seeing life through their eyes. It's just a totally different lens, and it brings me back to the simplicity and what's at the heart of the human experience. This all sounds very heady and everything, but it's, I think, a really important source of strength, inspiration, and regrounding, if you will. And I think time to even just the morning walking the dog. I don't bring my phone with me. I think we have just so much of this screen time, and you don't have that idle time for your brain just to do its thing. How many times do we had that great idea in the shower, for example? It's real. So that's something really important that I totally agree with Jeremy on. Books I'm reading, it has nothing to do with marketing, but it's a very cool book. David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me. I'm like 2/3 through. But If I think my life's tough, okay. We got this guy over here, incredible perseverance, just a ridiculous individual story of grit and determination and what the human body and mind can do. So really cool from that standpoint. What am I listening to? I'm listening to music. Actually really like music. And that also is another time to let your mind do its thing. I might have disagreements with my kids as to what music is good and what to listen to, but I really enjoy it. And then from a podcast standpoint, I do listen to Rogan. I think that there's stuff having to do with just culture and what's going on out there. And there's some really interesting guests. And sometimes if I don't like the guests, I just don't listen to them. Lex Friedman, I think, is a typical one in terms of just technology and where things are heading that way. And again, bringing some of these topics that I wouldn't have any knowledge of to the forefront. And then I love the Crush Live Poker podcast. I also really like the game of poker. There's a lot of strategy, a lot of math involved, a lot of reading, human interaction, and it's an exciting, interesting mental challenge. And what am I watching? I just finished Shogun because
So
of all,
good.
right?
Love Shogun.
It was like, okay, am I going to get into this or not? But I stuck with it, and holy cow.
Always
Mark and
really
I-
impressed by people who listen to Rogan and Lex Friedman. Those are 3-hour-long podcasts.
Oh, please.
That's-
It's not like I hit this thing in one fell swoop. I'll
you
take
got
one
me breaking
chunk.
that up into bite-sized chunks.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And it's by topic or guest. It's, okay, this is really interesting. I'm going to go deeper.
Totally.
Mark and I also have this text exchange going back and forth on trying to perfect the omelet.
The French omelet.
The French omelet. We recently shared a restaurant experience together of this amazing omelet, and we were so mind-boggled by this. We committed ourselves to trying to perfect that omelet. And so we constantly send each other back and forth omelet pictures.
Iterations on the omelet.
Yeah.
Have we made substantial progress?
Yeah, I'm curious.
There's weeks where we peak and then
Yeah. There's 3 elements that we're trying to get all into perfect harmony, and one is always out of too far out. Yeah, exactly. And it's like the color, the consistency, and the shape.
You feel like you have it down.
With just 3 eggs. That's all you can use. Butter, salt.
and creme fraiche.
Mm.
But creme fraiche just on top, not in.
Yeah, after the fact.
Got it.
Can I ask you guys a question?
Of
Yeah,
course.
by all means.
All right. You mentioned before, or we might have been rolling, we might not have been, I don't remember, but you said, hey, you guys invented the podcast advertisement. Can you tell us from your vantage point what you remember and what you're struck by relative to that statement and the serial podcast and all of that? And do you think that we should embrace more of that?
I already knew MailChimp before I heard the podcast. I think I
Okay.
was even using it for a side hustle that I had. And I remember the little kid saying MailChimp. I just remember. And it was always, and I would listen to Serial probably like on a long run or something. And it would always come on. And typically when there's an ad, I'm like, fast forward. I don't want to hear this. But I would never fast forward that one because there was something pure about that reaction that I was always like, it just gave me a little chuckle. Like every time I was like, oh, there's the MailChimp. And then I would just, whatever, wait for the very dark Serial hot test to continue. There was also something about the contrast between the content and this moment of like joy. I think that like that essence is in your marketing today. So I think you have embraced it, whether it's silly. I don't think I've heard a podcast ad for MailChimp in a while, but that just maybe because I'm listening to very different type of podcasts than I used to back in the day. Yeah, but that always, like, actually, if I think of podcast advertising, I always think of the brand, like every single time.
All right.
It's a good place to be.
Thank you both so much for joining us. That is it for this episode of Funnel Vision. You can find us on all the major podcast platforms, and we'll be posting the full interview on YouTube under the Wix Studio page. Be sure to hit subscribe to stay up to date on our latest episode. You can also find more great resources for marketers at our content hub linked below or in the show notes. Thank you, everyone, and see you next time on Funnel Vision.